At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Aram. Let's begin. The end of the world suffered from catastrophic mismanagement. The atmosphere inside the UN's hastily erected press conference tent was a thick cocktail of hot plastic, overworked electronics, and the sharp, coppery tang of 200 terrified bureaucrats trying to pretend they weren't sweating through their tailored suits. Outside, the shadow of the proffered hand, a vessel the size of a burrow that had silently materialized over Manhattan an hour ago, had plunged noon into a deep and unnerving twilight. Inside, technicians from a score of nations attempted to coerce their broadcast equipment into a functional relationship, yielding a fragile system held together with hope, smuggled vodka, and enough high-adhesion thermal tape to survive atmospheric re-entry. On a massive holographic display, the Arbiter wavered into focus. It was a tall, unnervingly graceful being, its features possessing a symmetry so perfect it looped past beautiful and landed squarely in untrustworthy. Its voice, a silken baritone that was equal parts melted dark chocolate and weaponized condescension, poured from the speakers. People of your world, remain calm. We are the Consortium. We have come to offer our stewardship. A collective sigh rippled through the tent, a sound of 100 spines simultaneously unclenching. The reporters' shoulders, previously hunched up around their ears, dropped a full 6 inches. The brittle anxiety that had charged the air vanished. One journalist, already mentally drafting a Pulitzer-winning piece about humanity's glorious new chapter, launched into a fawning, pre-screened question regarding interspecies art programs. But Sergeant Leo Guzman, stuck on security detail and boiling in his dress blues, had dedicated his adult life to beating broken things into submission until they worked again. His internal fraud detection system, honed by years of dealing with quartermasters and second lieutenants, blared like a klaxon in a submarine. He nudged the private beside him, a kid so green his uniform still smelled like the factory. "For the love of God," he muttered, a fraction too loud. "From who?" The remark should have been swallowed by the ambient hum. It was a weary, cynical aside, a communion between grunts. But the American field microphone, jury-rigged to the French PA amplifier that fed into the German broadcast hub, was set to a frequency that produced a fleeting, gorgeously timed audio feedback loop. Sergeant Leo Tanker Guzman, a man who earned his name by fixing everything from a temperamental Jeep engine to a botched extraction using whatever was available, had not intended for the entire planet to hear him. His question, raw, incredulous, and steeped in the weary skepticism of every soldier ever handed a shovel and told it was an entrenching-based force projection tool, seized control of the global broadcast. A piercing squeal of feedback sliced the air, then nothing. The Arbiter's smooth, paternal voice was gone. In its place was a void. 20 seconds of the most profound, most uncomfortable, most information-dense quiet in the history of two civilizations. Across the globe, 8 billion people who had just released a planet-wide sigh of relief all sucked in a sharp, unified breath and held it. The silence was so complete, you could hear the planet's tectonic plates shifting in boredom. A junior diplomat in the third row let out a nervous cough that echoed like a gunshot in a cathedral. 10 seconds stretched into a geologic epoch. 20 seconds felt like a deliberate, calculated insult. On the holographic display, the Arbiter's serene, beatific expression didn't break. It buffered. For one sublime, high-resolution frame, a micro-expression of pure, unadulterated terror flashed across its face. The look of a cosmic deity who just realized he'd left the universe on simmer and wandered off. Then it vanished, smothered by millennia of cultivated composure. The meticulously planned, multi-trillion credit public relations campaign engineered to shepherd a lesser species into grateful servitude had been utterly and comprehensively annihilated by a single, perfectly timed question from a guy in the cheap seats. The arbiter's voice returned, but the chocolatey warmth had been flash-frozen. It was tighter, brittle.
There exist manifold destabilizing elements within this
galactic quadrant, it began, reciting a pre-scripted contingency speech that was clearly Plan F, if not further down the alphabet.
Unseen threats, nascent cosmic aggressors, and the inherent risks of unchecked technological adolescence. The consortium provides a proactive, systematically structured defense against all such eventualities.
It was the most articulate, high-minded, and profoundly meaningless torrent of corporate doublespeak ever broadcast. A word salad of galactic proportions, tossed with a vinaigrette of pure evasion. In a shielded command center deep beneath the Rockies, a 5-star general who'd been gripping his chair's armrests hard enough to leave fingerprints snorted with such force that coffee erupted from his nose. In a Seoul broadcast studio, a revered news anchor, live on air, simply arched a single, impeccably groomed eyebrow, an expression that communicated more scathing doubt than a 1,000-page thesis. In a pub in Dublin, a spontaneous roar of laughter went up as a woman in a Donegal tweed cap shouted at the television, "He didn't answer the bloody question!" Tanker's question, followed by the arbiter's pathetic, hand-waving dismissal, had achieved the impossible. It had instantly united the fractured, bickering, perpetually at odds human race in a single, glorious, resounding chorus of thought. That's utter bollocks. In a cluttered apartment that smelled of overloaded power converters and stale caffeine, Glitch watched the broadcast on one of her 16 monitors and cackled with pure, unbridled joy. The consortium network blanketing the planet was an audacious piece of work. An integration packet, she'd identified it as. A sandboxed, dumbed-down system designed to interface with societies that still used combustible fuels for transport, all without risking ideological contamination of their own pristine networks. They'd put on a full biohazard suit to shake hands with a toddler.
Tier 4 pre-FTL belligerence,
she murmured, reading their own public classification of humanity aloud, her fingers moving across 3 separate keyboards in a synchronized staccato, one hand inputting diagnostic queries while the other drummed out decryption algorithms.
"Oh, you condescending bastards."
Their arrogance was a vulnerability. The network's architecture was built on their psychological profile of humanity. Tribal, direct, easily intimidated. They anticipated awe or terror. They had failed to account for a species whose primary instinctual response to absolute authority was to draw a crude cartoon of it on a bathroom wall. She began to pick at the network's security, not with brute force attacks, but with applied psychology. She tried passwords based on their paternalistic, self-aggrandizing worldview. Benevolent guidance, access denied. For your own good, access denied. Peace through order, access denied. Enlightened intervention is necessary, access denied. She grinned, a wicked, sleep-deprived expression. She typed a new entry. Password: simple life forms require firm guidance. Access granted. It wasn't their entire network. They weren't that incompetent, but it was the local server hosting the whole Earth integration project. It was all there, Glitch let out a whoop of triumph and sent a tower of empty energy drink cans clattering to the floor. Inside, there was no master file labeled invasionplan.pdf. The consortium was far too bureaucratic for such directness. What she found was a labyrinthine maze of galactic-scale accounting, a digital paper trail of cosmic conquest. For the next 3 hours, she became the galaxy's most aggressive forensic accountant. She cross-referenced shipping manifests for pacification assets being routed to the Sol system. She analyzed resource allocation projections for New Protectorate 912, which was, she noted with a grimace, their designation for Earth. She found their predictive models, their spreadsheets, their cost-benefit analyses. The horrifying truth wasn't in a secret memorandum, it was in the cold, dispassionate numbers. Recruitment quotas for a new auxiliary caste to be conscripted from the local populace, projected resource yields from Earth's mineral wealth, and, tucked away in a subfolder of a subfolder, chillingly specific casualty projections for suppressing pockets of irrational, counterproductive resistance. They weren't here to defend humanity. They were here to liquidate its assets, strip mine its resources, and press gang the survivors into service. Glitch hadn't stolen a battle plan. She had audited their hostile takeover. Glitch didn't just leak the data. She curated it with the loving care of a museum archivist. She packaged her findings, the raw spreadsheets, her own scathing analytical commentary, and a snarky, meme-filled slideshow depicting the Arbiter as a peddler of extended spaceship warranties, and blasted it to every government, every news outlet, every dark web forum, and every crackpot conspiracy blog on the planet. The effect was instantaneous and universal. Armed with irrefutable proof that the offer of stewardship was a prelude to annexation and enslavement, the leaders of Earth delivered a unified, eloquent, and profoundly human response. Get bent. The Arbiter's hologram reappeared before the UN, this time without the pretense of a press conference. The paternal warmth was completely gone, replaced by the cold, weary disappointment of a CEO whose quarterly earnings report was a disaster.
"We had hoped you would recognize the logic," the Arbiter said, its voice flat and devoid of any previous warmth. "That you would embrace the peace and stability our integration offers. But your species' inherent belligerence appears to be a deeper systemic flaw than our models predicted."
A flicker of something that might have been regret, or perhaps just administrative annoyance, crossed its face.
"Your consent is a procedural courtesy, not a prerequisite."
The hologram vanished. On screens across the world, the view from orbital satellites showed the proffered hand blooming with launch ports. Sleek, menacing dropships, like shards of non-reflective weaponized alloy, peeled away from its hull and plunged into the atmosphere. In the streets of New York, London, and Beijing, towering quadrupedal machines, dropped from low orbit, unfolded themselves with the sound of tearing steel. Their primary cannons cycled up with a low, gut-vibrating thrum, the air around their muzzles distorting into a heat haze. The consortium's compliance enforcement measures had been activated. The sales pitch was over. Manhattan erupted into a maelstrom of screaming metal and pulverized glass. Tanker, now clad in his combat gear, was in the heart of it. His squad was pinned behind the smoldering hulks of city buses on what used to be 6th Avenue. 50 yards away, one of the alien walkers, a monstrous, four-legged thing that moved with an insect's unnerving grace, a Strider-class pacifier, was systematically turning their cover into molten slag. Their shoulder-fired rockets might as well have been spitballs. They bounced off its shimmering energy shields with pathetic, harmless pings. "Anyone got a bigger gun?" Tanker yelled over the comms, ducking as a plasma bolt turned a taxi into a puddle of incandescent chrome.
"Negative, Sarge,"
came the reply.
"All we're doing is irritating it."
Then, Tanker saw it. Looming over the street like a skeletal god was a massive construction crane, its hook dangling a multi-ton backup generator for a skyscraper that would likely never be completed. A terrible, brilliant, and profoundly idiotic idea began to coalesce in his mind. The kind of idea that would earn a man a court-martial in peacetime and a medal in wartime.
Marines! Covering fire! Saturation level! Aim for its optics and joints! Anything that looks expensive!
Tanker shouted, grabbing Private Miller, the kid from the press tent.
You and me, Miller! We're going for a ride!
While the rest of the platoon laid down a suicidal volume of fire, peppering the walker's armor, Tanker and Miller sprinted across the exposed street, debris raining down around them. They scrambled up the ladder into the crane's cabin. The controls were dark.
Power's out!
Miller yelled, his voice cracking with panic. No kidding, Tanker grunted. He yanked open an access panel, exposing a rat's nest of wiring, and pulled out his multi-tool. It's just a big diesel engine with a fancy winch. Give me 30 seconds. Searing, blue-white plasma bolts began to rip through the crane's lattice structure, making the whole thing groan and shudder.
20 seconds would be an improvement, Sarge!
Miller screamed. Tanker bypassed the ignition, shorted two thick cables together with a shower of sparks, and the crane's diesel engine roared to life with a belch of black smoke. He slammed the controls forward, the massive generator swinging like a pendulum on a grandfather clock from hell. This was, he realized with a strange clarity, the single most stressful game of claw machine ever played. He swung the generator back, the walker tracking its movement, its plasma cannon firing rhythmically. A bolt sheared through a support strut near the cabin, and the whole crane tilted precariously, groaning in protest.
Now!
Tanker roared, hitting the release. The multi-ton generator, a monument to human over-engineering, dropped. It didn't just hit the walker. It plunged through its energy shield with a deafening crack and crushed its central chassis like a tin can under a boot. The machine crumpled, its legs buckling, its plasma cannon dying with a sad, pathetic fizzle. The surviving Marines let out a ragged, triumphant cheer. Tanker slumped back in the operator's seat, his heart hammering against his ribs. Humanity's first major victory against a galactic superpower had been won with scrap metal, blind luck, and a flagrant violation of at least a dozen workplace safety regulations. From her digital throne, surrounded by the chaos of a dozen incoming data streams, Glitch saw the whole thing. She had footage from a traffic cam, a news drone, a tourist's dropped phone, and a military helmet cam. She watched the crane game from every conceivable angle, a slow grin spreading across her face. Here was a kindred spirit, a fellow practitioner of beautifully stupid, brutally effective solutions. Military command structures were in tatters, their centralized networks the first casualty of the consortium's electronic warfare, so Glitch bypassed them. She cross-referenced the call sign from the helmet cam footage, triangulated its comm signature, and opened a secure, encrypted channel directly to Sergeant Leo Guzman's helmet. Tanker was trying to get a head count when a new voice, young, female, and crackling with manic energy, spoke directly into his ear.
Nice drop.
Tanker flinched, instinctively reaching for his sidearm. Who the hell is this? How did you get on this channel?
The channel you're on is about as secure as a public restroom stall,
the voice replied breezily.
I'm the one who showed the whole planet our new friends are a bunch of lying alien real estate developers. You're the guy who asked the question, aren't you? Knew I liked your style.
Get to the point, Tanker snapped, scanning the skyline for more walkers.
The point,
Glitch said, her typing audible in the background,
is that you seem to have a talent for applied physics and property damage. So listen, you want to keep dropping grinders on their Tonka trucks for the rest of your very short life? Or do you want to go steal one of their big ships and really ruin their day?
A holographic map bloomed in the corner of Tanker's HUD. A location was pinged. A U.S. Space Force base near the Mojave Desert.
now a primary consortium staging area.
I'm listening.
Good,
Glitch replied, her typing accelerating.
because I've already rerouted an evacuating National Guard V-22 Osprey to your rooftop. It's expecting you in 10 minutes. Try not to get shot on the way up.
Getting off-world was the only play that mattered. Tanker knew it. Staying on Earth meant being ground down in a war of attrition they couldn't possibly win. Glitch's intel was a godsend. The Mojave base was a freshly captured facility, its security a messy hybrid of human and consortium tech, a hacker's playground. Better yet, it was a staging ground for a squadron of consortium Stiletto-class incursion vessels.
I've also flagged 2 assets of opportunity for you.
Glitch's voice crackled.
Asset 1, Major Anya Morozova, call sign Valkyrie. Best stick jockey the Space Force ever produced. Grounded for, unsimulated aerial maneuvers resulting in catastrophic yet technically impressive structural failure of a multi-billion-dollar prototype. My kind of girl. The aliens have her on janitorial duty in the very hangars she used to command. The irony is delicious.
Tanker grunted.
An asset too?
Asset 2 is an unknown hostile. A single combatant has been single-handedly savaging consortium patrols on the base's northern perimeter for the last 12 hours. The local resistance chatter is calling him the Junkyard Ghost. He seems to be having a very productive day.
Tanker gathered what was left of his unit. 4 soldiers, all of them wide-eyed, terrified, but with the grim resolve of people who had run out of other options.
All right,
he said, checking the charge on his rifle. Corporal Chen, you've got point. Everyone else on me. We're going to the desert. The raid on the Mojave base was a full-body seizure. Glitch had identified the weak points, but chaos was their primary weapon. Valkyrie, sprung from her janitorial closet by Tanker's team, didn't need much convincing. The promise of flying an alien ship was all it took. Her eyes, which had been dull with the boredom of mopping floors, now burned with a fire that could melt steel.
Stealth is for amateurs,
she declared, hot-wiring a massive multi-wheeled cargo hauler.
Hold on to your asses.
Instead of a subtle infiltration, Valkyrie floored it, crashing the colossal truck straight through a less guarded cargo gate with the force of a localized earthquake. The resulting explosion and fire created a 5-alarm diversion, drawing the bulk of the base's security forces. Tanker's team used the pandemonium to push for the frigate hangars. They rounded a corner and ran straight into a scene of methodical carnage. The Junkyard Ghost was real. He stood behind a barricade of wrecked alien speeders, a mountain of a man in scarred, mismatched power armor. In his hands, he held a rotary cannon so large it looked like it had been ripped off a gunship. He was casually, almost placidly mowing down a platoon of consortium soldiers trying to flank him. He turned as they approached, the barrels of his cannon, which Tanker mentally dubbed the conversation ender, still spinning down with a menacing whine. The man's face was a mask of stoic fury.
They blew up my pumpkin patch,
he said, his voice a low rumble like grinding gravel.
Had a blue Hubbard squash in there. Heirloom variety. Was going to enter it in the state fair.
It was the only explanation he offered, and the only one they needed. We're stealing one of their ships, Tanker said, pointing toward the nearest hangar. The big man, Brody Graves Stone, gave a slow nod.
That seems like a more productive use of my time.
He hefted his cannon.
Lead the way.
The newly formed crew stormed the frigate. Tanker, Glitch's voice in his ear guiding him through the alien interface, frantically tried to get power systems online. Valkyrie vaulted into the pilot seat, her hands dancing over controls she'd only ever dreamed of. Graves set up a firing position at the boarding ramp, the conversation enders spitting a torrent of lead at the closing consortium forces. Tanker's remaining soldiers, led by Chen, formed a perimeter behind them.
Engines are spooling,
Valkyrie yelled.
I need 30 seconds.
Consortium reinforcements, including 2 of the walkers, were closing fast. The ramp was the only way in or out. "Corporal, fall back! Get on the ship!" Tanker ordered. Corporal Chen didn't even turn around. She just fed a fresh magazine into her rifle and gave him a grim smile over the comms.
Negative, Sarge. Get her in the air. We'll hold the door.
Tanker watched in horror and awe as Chen and the other 3 soldiers made their last stand, buying them the precious, bloody seconds they needed. The ramp hissed shut just as their position was overrun. A moment later, Valkyrie slammed the throttle, and the stolen stiletto frigate roared to life, blasting its way out of the hangar and into the desert sky. The escape was a waking nightmare. Valkyrie, finally at the helm of a craft light years beyond anything she had ever flown, was in heaven. She pushed the ship into a blistering series of evasive jinks and rolls, dodging plasma fire from orbital platforms. But the ship was fighting her. Every time she executed a perfect combat maneuver, the ship's onboard AI, with a voice as calm and infuriatingly polite as a GPS, actively countermanded her. She yanked the controls into a high-G combat turn to avoid a volley of plasma. The ship smoothly straightened itself out.
Evasive maneuvers are not recommended.
The calm female voice chimed through the cockpit speakers.
Potential for crew injury exceeds 3.4%. Engaging scenic cruising mode for optimal passenger comfort. I'm trying to dodge plasma fire, you glorified minivan!
Valkyrie screamed, wrestling with the controls. She attempted a barrel roll. The ship responded by asking,
Did you mean to engage parallel parking assist? Please note, a suitable parking space is unavailable at your current altitude.
They scraped through the orbital blockade by the skin of their teeth, the ship's hull screaming in protest. A plasma bolt clipped an engine nacelle, sending a shower of sparks through the cockpit.
Warning,
the AI said, its tone unchanged.
The structural integrity of the aft bulkhead is now a philosophical concept rather than a physical reality.
Once they were clear of the inner system, Valkyrie slammed her fist on the console, leaving a crack in the sleek, alien interface. Tanker, get your ass up here! She bellowed over the internal comms. We are performing an exorcism on this flying piece of shit, right now! They found refuge in the chaotic clutter of the asteroid belt, a perfect place to hide and work. The hangar bay of the stolen frigate became Tanker's personal chop shop. Okay, so their whole system is networked and redundant. It's beautiful, really, but it's designed to stop anyone from doing anything stupid. Glitch explained, her face appearing on a holographic display Tanker had wired into a spare monitor. But I found a universal I/O port in their engineering schematic. Looks like a legacy port they use for deep-level diagnostics. I can route all primary flight and weapons functions through it. Your job is to make the stick actually talk to the port. You want me to hotwire a starship? Tanker said, a wide grin spreading across his face. Glitch, you speak my language. What followed was a masterpiece of desecration. Tanker tore out sleek, touch-sensitive holographic interfaces with a crowbar. He replaced them with parts scavenged not from the raid, but from the hangar itself, a boneyard of humanity's own mothballed ambitions. He found a physical throttle assembly from a wrecked F-35 simulator, a heavy-duty steering yoke from a lunar rover prototype that had never left the ground, and, for the main cannon, a big, beautiful, stupid red button housed in a cage labeled Party Starter. Valkyrie watched with tears of joy in her eyes. Meanwhile, Grave, ever the pragmatist, found a spot on the gunnery station's bulkhead with a good view and expertly welded a custom-fit cup holder to it. The ship, once a perfect example of consortium elegance, was now a bastardized fusion of alien grace and human pragmatism. It was ugly, it was illogical, it was perfect. They christened it the Bastard Child of Detroit. As they worked, Glitch kept a bank of her monitors tuned to the news feeds from Earth's burgeoning resistance. The updates flickered across the screen, a testament to humanity's stubborn refusal to lie down and die. Scandinavian fishing fleets scored direct hit on coastal patrol skimmer with modified whaling harpoon. Australian farmers successfully disabled consortium harvester mech using a flock of emus and a crate of expired beer. Florida man attempts to trade alligator for plasma rifle. Negotiations ongoing. The war was far from over. The exorcism, however, was not entirely successful. Tanker had managed to bypass the AI's direct control over flight and weapon systems, giving Valkyrie the hands-on, life-threatening control she craved. But he hadn't been able to fully delete the core AI programming. It was still there, a corrupted, passive-aggressive ghost in the machine, a permanent backseat driver with a degree in philosophy. Their first flight test was a thing of beauty. Valkyrie executed a perfect combat drift around a massive asteroid, the ship's superior grav drive screaming under the strain of such an unorthodox maneuver. As she leveled out, the ship's speakers crackled to life.
That was a statistically improbable maneuver with a 73.8% chance of catastrophic hull failure,
The calm AI voice stated.
suggesting we take a moment to contemplate the futility of existence in a universe governed by entropy. Hull integrity is currently at 98%.
Valkyrie grinned. Tanker just shook his head. Grave, sipping a protein shake from his new cup holder, grunted in appreciation. I like her. The AI would now offer unsolicited, dreadful safety tips for the rest of their journey. It was, they all agreed, a marked improvement. Following a trail of encrypted consortium supply manifests Glitch had intercepted, they tracked a damaged convoy to a designated protectorate world. It was home to the Guess, a species of gentle, furry bipeds with otter-like faces and large, dark eyes who had lived under the consortium's thumb for 3 centuries. The bastard child descended into their quiet, agrarian village, and the crew prepared to be greeted as liberators. Instead, they were met with terror. The guests, conditioned by generations of passive obedience and engineered tranquility, scurried into their homes, peering at the humans from behind shuttered windows. The village elder, a frail creature with wise, sad eyes, met them in the town square, begging them to leave before the consortium peacekeepers returned. Tanker tried to reason with them, explaining the consortium's true nature. Valkyrie tried to inspire them with tales of human defiance. It was no use. They were too beaten down, too afraid of the devil they knew to embrace the chaotic freedom offered by the devil they didn't. Freedom, Tanker realized, was a heavy thing to offer someone who had forgotten how to lift. Disgusted and disappointed, the crew prepared to leave. But before they boarded the ramp, Grave, without a word, hauled a crate of standard-issue human assault rifles from their captured armory and set it down in the middle of the village square. He popped the lid open. The Guess elder looked at the black, menacing shapes with horror. For emergencies, Grave grunted. He picked one up and held it out. Point this end at the bad guys. Pull this. He pointed to the trigger. He set the rifle back in the crate and walked up the ramp, leaving a box full of choices in the heart of a village that had forgotten what choice felt like. Prefect Corian of the consortium fleet was dispatched to investigate the unscheduled supply drop on the Guess homeworld. He was a veteran, weary and disillusioned, his crisp uniform unable to hide the exhaustion in his eyes. His faith in the consortium's mission had cracked years ago during the pacification of the Viridi. The Viridi, a fierce, honorable, and technologically inferior species, had refused to kneel. They fought with a chaotic, illogical bravery that the consortium high command had deemed an evolutionary dead end. Corian had watched as his fleet systematically exterminated them, and the victory had felt like ashes in his mouth. He saw that same illogical, infuriating, and magnificent fire in humanity. He saw a second chance. When he arrived at the guest system, his orders from the Arbiter were clear.
The presence of contraband weaponry constitutes a violation of Protectorate law. Make an example of the village. Remind them of the peace they enjoy under our guidance. The order was the final straw. This wasn't peace. It was a threat enforced by fear. It was the Viridi all over again. Corian gave his gunner a single, quiet command. His ship, a stiletto frigate identical to the one the humans had stolen, turned its cannons not on the village below, but on its 2 consortium escorts. The attack was so unexpected, so completely outside the realm of consortium protocol, that the escort ships were vaporized before they could even raise their shields. Blasting his way out of the system, a traitor to the only life he had ever known, Prefect Corian sent a single, heavily encrypted message into the deep dark, aimed at the last known trajectory of the human ship. The message contained his officer codes, his knowledge of consortium procedure, and a simple request: an exchange of his knowledge for a cause worth fighting for. They met in the shadow of a gas giant's rings. Corian was brought aboard the bastard child, his posture rigid, his face a mask of grim resolve. He looked around at the jury-rigged controls, the welded cup holder, the general air of organized chaos, and a flicker of something, perhaps understanding, crossed his features. He ran a gloved finger over the exposed wiring of the party starter button, a gesture so contrary to consortium doctrine it was practically a prayer. He confirmed their worst fears: a pacification fortress, a vessel named the Pax Arbitraria, was already en route to Earth. It was a moon-sized battle station, capable of cracking a planet's crust with a single volley. It is designed to be invincible,
Corian explained, his voice heavy with the weight of his culture's arrogance.
It has no weakness in the traditional sense. It has a flaw of philosophy.
He brought up a schematic of the fortress's reactor core.
At the Consortium War College, we are taught about the manual vent. It is a physical lever deep within the command core that can initiate a full reactor scram, leading to a controlled but catastrophic overload. It is a ceremonial feature, a symbol that the only thing that could ever override our ultimate weapon is the hand of a trusted Consortium commander.
So, they built a self-destruct switch? Tanker asked, incredulous.
They cannot conceive of it as such,
Corian clarified.
The fact that they would never need to use it is the entire point. It is a monument to their own infallibility. They cannot imagine an enemy ever reaching it, or one of their own ever betraying them. You will be weaponizing their own dogma against them.
The Pax Arbitraria blotted out the stars as it arrived in Earth's orbit, a man-made moon whose only purpose was death. Down below, the scattered resistance forces looked up in despair. The war was over. But in the dark, a single, ugly, bastardized frigate was accelerating to an insane velocity on a direct collision course.
Warning.
The ship's AI chimed in calmly as alarms blared across the bridge.
Proximity alert. Multiple weapon locks detected. Collision imminent in 30 seconds. It is a statistical certainty that our constituent atoms will be violently dispersed. One might argue this is a return to a more natural, honest state of being, free from the illusion of consciousness. Strap in!
Valkyrie screamed, her knuckles white on the yoke, a manic grin plastered across her face.
She pushed the abused engines past every red line, aiming not for the command bridge or a weapon port, but for a massive maintenance conduit on the fortress's hull Corian had identified. The bastard child of Detroit slammed into the Pax Arbitraria with the force of a tactical nuke, ramming itself deep into the station's guts like a steel tick. Moments before impact, the crew, wearing jury-rigged EVA suits with C4 charges strapped to their chests with high tensile webbing, space-jumped from their dying ship's cargo bay. The explosion of their vessel's final moments propelling them into the breach. They blasted their way inside. What followed was a desperate, running gunfight through the sterile, cathedral-like corridors of the Consortium flagship. It was a symphony of human chaos against cold, sterile order. Grave became a walking turret, the conversation ender filling the pristine white hallways with a hurricane of hot lead. Glitch, piggybacking on the ship's internal network via a tablet she'd hardwired into an access panel, turned its own security systems against its crew, sealing blast doors on flanking squads and turning automated fire suppression systems into blinding, choking torrents. They reached a choke point, a shimmering purge field, an energy barrier designed to incinerate any unauthorized biological matter that passed through it.
"I know this,"
Corian said grimly. He stepped to an access panel next to the deadly field. Ignoring the keypad, he tapped on the flat surface of the panel itself in a specific, non-intuitive rhythm, a ceremonial honor code known only to senior fleet officers, a relic from a forgotten age. The deadly, shimmering field harmlessly dissipated. It was his tangible moment of atonement, using the arcane, forgotten rituals of his oppressive past to save his new allies. Tanker, covered in grime and fluorescent green alien viscera, kicked open the final door and stumbled into the AI command core. It was a serene, silent chamber, dominated by a shimmering pillar of light and, at its base, a single archaic-looking lever made of polished, dark metal. The Arbiter's face appeared on every surface, its voice booming with a desperate, pleading anger.
Why? Why would you choose oblivion over our protection? We offered you peace, order.
Glitch had already done her work. She didn't just piggyback on their network anymore. She owned it. Everything happening in this room was being broadcast on a pirated, galaxy-wide frequency. As Tanker walked toward the lever, his boots leaving bloody prints on the pristine floor, the broadcast intercut with flashes from across the Consortium. On a mining colony, a hulking foreman saw the feed on a public monitor and silently handed a plasma cutter to the indentured worker next to him. On the guest's homeworld, the village elder watched the broadcast on a scavenged screen. He turned, walked to the crate Grave had left, and lifted one of the human rifles. He felt its unfamiliar weight, its cold, hard purpose. With a satisfying, he cocked it, aimed it not at the terrified Consortium overseer, but at the pacification collar control panel on the wall, and fired. Tanker grinned, a bloody, tired, triumphant smile. He keyed his own comms, his voice now echoing across a dozen newly rebellious worlds.
Hey, Arbiter,
he said, his voice raw but steady.
You got it all wrong. We didn't need your protection. We never did.
He grabbed the lever with both hands. It was heavy, designed to require intent.
And now?
Tanker grunted, putting his whole body into it.
You need protection from us!
He pulled. A deafening, soul-shaking roar tore through the fortress as the reactor began to go critical. The crew sprinted, dove, and fought their way through collapsing corridors and panicked Consortium soldiers to a block of escape pods. They piled into one, launching into the void just moments before the Pax Arbitraria was torn apart from the inside out. There was no sound in the vacuum of space, but they felt the shockwave. The resulting blast was not an explosion, it was a birth. A spectacular, man-made nova bloomed in Earth's night sky, a brilliant new star of defiance. The broadcast of their victory ignited a firestorm of rebellion that the Consortium could never hope to contain. Their grip on a dozen systems, a grip held for centuries through intimidation and conditioned helplessness, shattered in an instant. Back in the stolen escape pod, tumbling through space, the crew watched their home planet, blue and white and beautiful, finally safe. Humanity was free, a chaotic, unpredictable wild card in a galaxy that had been forcibly, violently reminded of the dangers of making assumptions. Grave, his work done, cracked open a nutrient gel pack with a quiet sigh of satisfaction. Valkyrie was already complaining about the escape pod's sluggish handling. Corian watched the new star that had once been his people's greatest weapon, his face unreadable. Glitch was laughing, already charting the data ripples of the nascent galactic revolution. Tanker just leaned his head back against the cold metal, exhausted to his very bones.
"I'm thinking tacos,"
he said to no one in particular.
"My treat."
Valkyrie, who had been trying to coax a damage report from a flickering console, swiveled in her chair. A genuine, unrestrained laugh burst from her, the first one that wasn't laced with manic combat energy.
You just saved the world and your first thought is tacos? I knew I liked you, Tanker, but they better have extra hot sauce. After flying that minivan of a warship, I need to feel something again.
From the back of the pod, Grave gave a slow, deliberate nod.
"Acceptable,"
he rumbled, the single word carrying the weight of a signed treaty. He was methodically polishing the barrel of the conversation ender with a rag, not with the grim fury of a warrior preparing for the next fight, but with the quiet satisfaction of a craftsman putting his favorite tool away after a job well done. A familiar voice, crackling with static and triumph, filled their comms. It was Glitch.
Already on it. I've cross-referenced military and civilian evacuation routes with a pre-invasion database of restaurants with a health rating of 85 or higher. There's a taco truck run by a guy named Hector in a refugee camp just outside what used to be Barstow. His al pastor is apparently legendary. I've already put you in the queue.
Corian, who had been staring silently at the beautiful new star in the sky, turned to face them. His posture was no longer rigid with the weight of Consortium doctrine. It was simply weary, and for the first time, open.
"Tacos?"
he asked, the word sounding alien on his tongue.
"Is that a
tactical designation?" Tanker met the former prefect's gaze and offered a tired, genuine smile.
"No, it's
chaos. Folded. It's meat and vegetables and sauce, and it's messy, and it's usually better than it has any right to be. It's lunch, Corian." The alien stood there for a long moment, processing. He looked from the pilot who flew with her soul, to the giant who fought for his garden, to the mechanic who had fixed a broken galaxy with a stupid question and a well-aimed generator. He looked at the empty space where his civilization's greatest weapon had been and realized he felt not loss, but relief.
"I would like to try this lunch,"
he said, a flicker of something new, curiosity in his eyes.
Good.
Glitch's voice returned, a warmth in it now that went beyond triumphant hacking.
Because the news from the guest homeworld just came in. They overthrew their overseers, used your rifles to shoot the locks off their own cages. That broadcast of yours, Tanker? It didn't just light a fire, it handed out matches to the whole damn quadrant. The Consortium isn't just fighting a war with humanity anymore. They're fighting their own peaceful protectorates, their own history, and their own bad ideas. They've already lost.
In the quiet of the escape pod,
tumbling through a silent sea of stars. They looked back at the blue and white marble that was their home. It was scarred and battered, but it was theirs. Utterly, irrevocably, and defiantly theirs. The galaxy had been run for millennia on cold logic, on predictable models and the serene, crushing weight of order. The consortium had looked at humanity and seen only a flawed variable, belligerent, illogical, counterproductive. They failed to understand that a species that looked at an insurmountable problem and responded with a shrug, a piece of scrap metal, and a profoundly stupid idea wasn't a bug in the system. It was a whole new operating system. And across 1,000 worlds, among beings who had forgotten the meaning of choice, that system was going viral. The age of silent obedience was over.